A young woman is squeezed into a hot tub with a group of male jockeys. As more men crowd in, she curls up awkwardly in one corner. She once believed talent alone would earn respect, but when she asked a trainer for a mount in an upcoming race, he mocked both her and her late sister. To make racing weight, she trained before dawn in the freezing cold. For days, she ate almost nothing. She even turned to dangerous methods to keep sweating, all to shed the last few pounds. She would go on to ride in more than Ba Ninh Hai tram races, and win Ba Tram Sao Moi Mo of them. She endured 7 serious falls, broke 16 bones, and entered intensive care 3 times. What carried her through prejudice and pain was always the same thing: a racing dream that once seemed impossible. Michelle was born into a family of jockeys, but when she was only 6 months old, her mother died in a car accident. As the youngest of 10 children, she was never treated like fragile cargo. Her older siblings teased her constantly. During one fierce argument, Michelle grabbed a shovel in a rage and threatened to dig up her mother so someone would finally defend her. The words shattered her father. Patty gently explained that her mother had never truly left them. She was watching over the family and protecting them from heaven. When Michelle still could not calm down, Patty shifted the conversation and tested her knowledge of racing. He was stunned by how much she knew. His youngest daughter already had an instinctive feel for horses, racing, and the smallest details. So Patty gave Michelle her first serious riding lesson. She was too excited to sleep that night, so she carried a blanket into the stable and slept beside the horses. Patty smiled when he found her there. The first time Michelle climbed into a saddle, she showed no fear. She felt only wonder. She rode into the evening light as if she had entered a painting. From that moment, the dream took hold. Deep inside her, her natural ability filled Patty with pride. The next day, he took her to a race so she could learn from the family, but one of Michelle's brothers sat in a wheelchair and refused to ride. He said he had twisted his ankle and could not squeeze it into his boot. Patty had no patience for excuses. He sliced the boot open and forced it over the swollen foot. Once the boot was on, Patty rushed the siblings into the car. The race was about to begin. It was an extraordinary day in Ballarat. 5 jockeys at the same race meeting came from the Payne family, a remarkable achievement in Australian racing. At the track, Michelle watched through binoculars and followed every move. Other families cheered loudly for their riders. Patty barely needed to look up. He could sense where every horse was. Just as expected, Brigid surged ahead and won comfortably, but Patty barely praised her. He focused instead on the brother who finished second, Patrick. Patty said a few more strong rides might earn Patrick a Melbourne Cup mount. Michelle immediately spoke up for Brigid. Her sister had won, so why was everyone discussing Patrick? Stevie quietly told her that women were rarely given equal chances. In the nation's biggest race, the Melbourne Cup runs over Ba Ninh Hai tram meters and tests a horse's stamina, as well as a jockey's judgment and skill. No woman had ever won it. Michelle began to realize that even exceptional women could be trapped by old prejudices. Soon after, the Melbourne Cup arrived. At school, the students gathered to watch the race live. When the gates opened, Michelle's brother Patrick broke sharply and briefly took the lead, but he ultimately finished last. After school, Michelle asked Patty how a horse that led the field could finish at the back. Patty explained that Patrick had moved too early. Michelle did not understand it yet, but she remembered every word. Her dream continued growing in silence. A decade passed. Michelle was now a teenager. Michelle was now in high school. One morning, after Patty dropped her off, he started to drive away. When Sister Dominique stopped him, she told him Michelle was a capable student. The problem was her constant excuses to leave class. Patty's answer surprised her. While the others studied, Michelle often slipped away to follow races from the restroom. Normally, getting caught meant punishment, like cleaning restrooms for a week, but Sister Dominique wanted more than punishment. She urged Michelle to stay in school, rather than simply follow older siblings, who had already left. Michelle heard the warning, but her future still lay at the track. At about 15, she left school for an apprenticeship. From then on, Patty took her to the track each day and trained her himself. He was both father and first coach. As the training continued, Patty began to wonder whether she was ready for professional racing. Determined to match her siblings, Michelle trained relentlessly. Paddy passed on the practical lessons racing had taught him. Before every race, she had to judge whether the turf was firm or wet. The ground changed a horse's speed. On this course, the outside lanes were softer than the rail. That made the wider route more demanding. So a jockey should start in the most efficient position near the rail. A horse gallops with its lungs, endures with its heart, and wins with character. A jockey must feel when the horse is tiring, and know exactly when to move. Even without an early lead, a rider must stay calm and save energy. Nothing is settled before the final stride. Michelle absorbed it all. She memorized every lesson. Under Paddy's guidance, her skills improved rapidly. Paddy entered her in an early qualifying race. A strong finish would show whether she was ready to compete. She entered the changing area full of hope, and found a space designed only for men. The women's room was little more than a storage closet. Michelle silently vowed to win and challenge the double standard. But once the race began, she missed her chance. She stayed at the back. Even Paddy's shouting could not help. Her first competitive ride ended far behind the field. As Paddy had warned, confidence alone cannot win a race. Patience and stamina matter too. Paddy said she might not be ready, and suggested she return to school, but Michelle had no intention of quitting. His criticism only hardened her resolve. From then on, she trained even harder. Her second, third, and fourth races also ended in defeat. Still, she refused to break. She replayed every lesson Paddy had given her. Then came race number 5. Michelle hugged the inside rail, and held a half-length advantage. At last, she understood what Paddy meant by patience. Down the final stretch, Michelle earned her first career victory. Just as she began to celebrate the breakthrough, the family learned Brigid had died. Brigid, Michelle's older sister, had pioneered the way for female jockeys in Victoria. The film links her death to a serious racing fall. That detail was dramatized for the movie. Brigid had already helped open doors for women in Australian racing. Losing her left Paddy with a fear he could not escape. It made him resist Michelle's career. After Brigid's death, Paddy tried to keep Michelle away from racing for 2 years. Then one day, Michelle could no longer accept that life. She finally confronted him. When Paddy refused to bend, Michelle knew the argument was over. Still furious, she threw a few clothes into the trunk. She was leaving to chase her dream. As she adjusted the mirror, she saw Stevie standing silently in the doorway. The sight nearly changed her mind, but she drove away. Paddy watched from the window as his daughter left. What looked like control came from a father terrified of what racing could take from him. But Paddy also knew Michelle could never abandon the dream that defined her. Only later would she understand him. For now, he was simply blocking her future. Leaving home initially felt liberating. The wider racing world was not. She had no idea how brutal it could be. Whenever she approached a stable, the men met her with silence. Michelle kept trying. She waited outside for someone to notice her. An entire night passed without an offer. Some trainers did speak, but only to ask about Paddy. The next morning, she set an alarm and returned to the same doors. Men she had already beaten were welcomed inside. The double standard was obvious. Still, Michelle kept asking for a chance. One trainer reduced her to her look, and suggested an improper trade for a ride. The encounter exposed the harassment women faced in racing. After sitting alone in her car, Michelle reluctantly returned to her family, and asked a sister for an introduction. Her sister gently warned her what lay ahead. Michelle refused to become anyone's prey, or let men control her future. She returned to the track and exercised a horse. The horse flew around the course, but her skill still failed to impress them. They seemed more interested in her appearance than her ability. Paddy could not bear to watch her struggle, so he quietly asked his friend Joan Sadler to manage Michelle. He made Joan promise to keep his role secret. Paddy did not care about fame. He only wanted his daughter safe. Though Joan had never managed a jockey, she became the ally Michelle needed. She called every stable she could find, but no one offered Michelle a ride. Once they heard the jockey was a woman, many simply hung up. Michelle began to suspect. Paddy had arranged Joan's help. Then a trainer who knew her father finally called with an offer. He would give Michelle a race mount. The two women could barely contain their excitement, and left immediately for the track. At last, Michelle had a real opportunity away from home. She was finally judged in a race, and she answered with a victory. From that day on, Michelle gave everything to the dream. She knew she had to work harder than the men around her. She woke at 3 every morning, and drove between regional meetings. The travel was exhausting, but her results kept kept improving. Even sharing a recovery bath with male jockeys became another indignity she endured. Eventually, the work paid off. Through sheer persistence, Michelle won at Group 1 level, and proved she belonged among the elite. The result opened another major door. She immediately wanted to tell Paddy, but he claimed he was too busy to talk. Michelle assumed he did not care. She never knew Paddy quietly followed every race from afar. That was how he loved, deeply, but almost without words. Stevie, meanwhile, supported his sister without hesitation. He knew every detail of every race she rode. At the next meeting, Michelle remembered Paddy's lessons, and carefully studied the turf. Her preparation helped her win again, but instead of praise, she heard cruel remarks from male rivals. They told her she did not belong. Michelle was chasing an even bigger stage. Paddy watched with growing fear, convinced she risked too much. Whenever she charged through a narrow opening, her results still earned trust from trainers and officials. She was offered a better mount, but only if she made the assigned weight. Joan wanted her to refuse, but Michelle feared losing the opportunity, and accepted the dangerous demand. Over the next 3 days, the pressure became severe. Michelle ate far too little, and pushed her exhausted body even harder. She was still above the required weight. Desperate to keep the ride, she used unsafe methods to dehydrate rapidly. The process left her weak, overheated, and dangerously depleted. The film presents this as a serious health risk, not a technique to admire or imitate. When the deadline came, Michelle was barely standing. She stepped onto the scale, and saw that she had reached 50 kilograms. She barely had time to change before rushing to her sister's wedding. She arrived before the reception. The workout clothes beneath her dress made the rush impossible to hide. During the wedding speech, Paddy first blessed the newlyweds. As everyone raised a glass, he suddenly changed direction, and praised another remarkable child. Michelle brightened, thinking he would finally acknowledge everything she had sacrificed. Instead, he proudly celebrated Stevie. Michelle was genuinely happy for him. She knew Paddy struggled with emotion, but protected his children through quiet acts of loyalty and care. Days later, Michelle entered another major race, determined to prove herself again. She rode Vladivostok confidently, and moved into winning position. No rival could catch her as she drove toward the line. The victory should have been another breakthrough. Instead, disaster struck without warning. Michelle crossed the line first, believing the danger was over, but just beyond the finish, Vladivostok suddenly faltered, and threw her hard onto the track. Paddy watched his motionless daughter on television, and began to tremble. The horse lay nearby, breathing heavily, while Michelle remained unconscious. She was rushed to a hospital. Stevie hurried home with the devastating news. Her siblings gathered at the hospital, but Michelle did not wait. Doctors found extensive bleeding around her brain, and damage to the right frontal lobe. They could not operate immediately. They first had to monitor the pressure before deciding what came next. Their careful language carried a terrible meaning. Michelle might never wake up. Paddy finally broke down. He regretted teaching her to ride, and blamed himself for failing to stop her. The guilt nearly crushed him, but nothing could be changed now. After gathering himself, he placed Mary's necklace in Michelle's hand, and asked her mother to watch over their daughter. After days of treatment and uncertainty, Michelle began to regain consciousness. Her recovery was slow and uncertain. Her siblings took turns caring for her, and surrounded her with support. Stevie brushed her hair, and promised she would recover. With treatment and family beside her, Michelle slowly improved. At first, she still could not speak. Tests showed the injury had disrupted language processing. When a nurse held up several fingers, Michelle could not name the number. Yet while ordinary language failed her, her memory for racing remained astonishing. She recalled past Melbourne Cup winners. Before fully recovering reading and writing, Paddy gently rubbed her back, and Michelle finally felt his love without words. He had never forgotten how much racing meant to her. After weeks of observation, Paddy brought her home to continue recovering. At the door, a sign read, "Welcome home, you little pest." Her siblings had teased her all her life, but when she truly needed them, they were first at her side. Stevie had protected his younger sister for as long as she could remember. Back home, Michelle began intensive rehabilitation. Even doctors were surprised by her progress, though they warned against strenuous activity. Michelle cared about one question: when could she race again? For a while, she slipped into despair, and sat alone as the days passed. Then one of the family horses approached. The animal drew her back to the life she loved. Tears filled her eyes. She could not abandon the dream, or the horses that had always driven it. Without asking for help, Michelle used every ounce of strength to mount. For one moment, she felt like herself again. From the kitchen, Paddy saw her unsteady figure on horseback. He knew his determined daughter had returned. Once recovered, Michelle chose to race again. Her siblings strongly objected, but Paddy, once her fiercest opponent, unexpectedly supported her. A true dream could not stay imprisoned by fear. Paddy helped rebuild her training plan. Her return began years of relentless competition. Over the seasons that followed, she rode over Ba Ninh High tram races and won Ba Tram Sao Moi Mo, surviving 7 falls and 16 broken bones. She entered intensive care 3 times. Few people could endure so much, yet pain never ended Michelle's story. One day, Michelle drove Stevie to work. Stevie, who has Down syndrome, had built a career through skill and dedication. He worked as an experienced professional strapper. His success proved that ability can flourish where others see only limits. As Michelle prepared to leave, a racehorse named Prince of Penzance caught her eye. Prince paced restlessly in his stall. When Michelle stepped closer, she felt an immediate connection. It was as if rider and horse recognized something in each other. Darren introduced him as Prince of Penzance. Prince had survived years of injuries. Darren knew Michelle had stepped away from racing, but she believed Prince still had more to give. She asked for one chance to ride him. Michelle approached him with quiet confidence. Darren agreed to a trial. From the first ride, Prince seemed to respond to her. They galloped along the beat. His hoof cut a deep trail through the wet sand, marking the start of their journey. Michelle felt completely in tune with him. Prince's stamina and speed surprised her immediately. Back at the stable, she asked Darren to let her race Prince. Darren hesitated because of Michelle's injuries and Prince's complicated medical history. Pairing them carried real risk, but her persistence finally earned his trust. Michelle and Prince became a team, with Darren training and Stevie caring for him. Prince grew stronger and returned to racing condition. Michelle rode him with confidence, and they collected important victories. Eventually, they reached the Moonee Valley Cup. 9 horses burst from the barriers. Midway through the race, Michelle and Prince were boxed behind the leaders. As the home stretch approached, a narrow opening appeared. Michelle saw it instantly. She guided Prince through the gap and held on in a tense finish. Prince won and secured a Melbourne Cup berth. Just as the dream came within reach, another setback followed. The racing stewards reviewed Michelle's ride. After another jockey protested the move, they considered a careless riding charge. No one claimed she meant to hurt anyone, but intent was not the issue. Michelle argued the lane had been open. The panel still ruled against her. Under the careless riding rule, she received a suspension covering 20 race meetings. The victory remained official, so Prince still qualified for the cup. The owners were relieved. Their priority was protecting the investment, not necessarily keeping Michelle aboard. Meanwhile, Paddy suffered another heart problem and went to the hospital. The scare forced the family to face his age. Some urged Michelle to leave racing for a safer, more settled life. Michelle answered with a joke. She had already found her prince. Stevie also worried about the future and life without Paddy. Michelle listened with affection and respect, never pity. She reminded him they were family and promised they would build a life with a home, horses, and meaningful work. When Stevie asked what would happen one day, Michelle fell silent. She had never let herself imagine it. The next morning, a phone call broke the silence. Her sister said Paddy was gone, and Michelle collapsed, thinking he had died. Years of practice strength vanished, and she began to sob. A moment later, Paddy walked through the door. Her sister only meant he had left the hospital. Paddy greeted Michelle with one dry remark. He had rushed home, so she could stop worrying and focus on the dream ahead. Days later, Prince's owners met to choose their Melbourne Cup jockey. Darren argued Michelle deserved the ride. She had taken the risk and guided Prince into the race. Why deny her now? Most owners still preferred a male jockey. They claimed the final 100 meters would come down to physical strength, and in more than a century, no woman had won the Melbourne Cup. At that moment, Michelle entered the room. She was ready to fight for the ride and addressed the owners directly. Strength mattered, she admitted, but understanding the horse and reading the race mattered just as much. Above all came patience. A jockey relying only on force would lose both horse and race. When Michelle left, the owners looked at one another without an answer. Then Darren said that anyone who wanted to know how to win the country's biggest race should listen to the rider who knew Prince best. The owners finally relented. They agreed to keep Michelle on Prince for the cup. Her suspension expired in time for a legal return. Prince entered as a Mo-Tram to one outsider. Joan still bet $40 on him. Even Sister Dominique, who once urged school, came to support her former student, and placed a small bet. The day before the race, Michelle spoke with Stevie about the barrier draw. She hoped for gate 1 or 2, and wanted to avoid barrier 18. No horse had won from that outside gate. Fortunately, Stevie was completely confident. Representing Prince at the draw, he pulled barrier number 1. It gave Prince the shortest path to the rail. That night, Michelle could not sleep. She replayed Paddy's lessons in her mind. A message from Stevie reassured her, and the tension slowly eased. On race day, Flemington Racecourse surged with excitement. Flowers filled the ground, and crowds streamed through every walkway. As Michelle walked through the tunnel, messages arrived from her family. Her sisters told her to stay calm, while her brothers offered final advice. Michelle no longer carried the dream alone. Her entire family rode with her in spirit. Once every horse was ready, the announcer introduced the jockeys. The field included former cup champions, veteran riders, and elite jockeys from around the world. Yet one fact stood out. Among 24 jockeys, only one was a woman. Michelle Payne. When her name was announced, some in the crowd openly doubted her. They were sure no woman could win. Darren gave one final reminder. Do not ask Prince for speed too early. Settle him and save his energy. Then move when a real opening appeared. One sister gave Michelle a long embrace. Then Michelle asked Stevie whether he believed she could win. Stevie said the horse he had prepared was already a champion. His confidence settled her nerves. Paddy watched every second of the broadcast, afraid to miss a glimpse of his daughter. The rest of the family filled the stands, proud of how far she had come. With everyone she loved behind her, Michelle rode toward barrier 1. She touched Mary's necklace, and remembered both Mary and Brigid, asking them to watch over her and Prince. The barriers flew open. 24 horses thundered down the course, and swept into the first turn. Prince did not brake sharply, so Michelle settled behind the early leaders. The owners immediately grew nervous, and seemed ready to blame Darren if the plan failed. Michelle never panicked. She trusted Paddy's lessons, and kept Prince near the inside rail. Patience and judgment mattered more than strength now. She waited for the race to come to her, and for one chance to change everything. With careful positioning, she guided Prince through the field, and settled into the middle of the pack. Her siblings shouted from the stands. Everyone who believed in her waited to see history break through. The owners finally saw a flicker of hope. Still, Michelle refused to rush. Inside the final Nom-Tram meters, the field shifted and opened a narrow lane. Michelle saw the opportunity instantly. She felt Prince ready beneath her. At the same moment, Paddy shouted at the television for her to go. With Ba-Tram meters left, Michelle sent Prince through. He swept past the leaders and took command. Max Dynamite chased through the final strides, but Prince held on. Michelle became the first woman to win the cup. Ride Like a Girl draws from Michelle Payne's remarkable true story. And the brother beside her is the real Stevie Payne, playing himself. The girl who once slept beside the horses spent years falling, healing, and trying again. Her persistence shattered entrenched prejudice. Nothing about the victory was guaranteed. It was built on experience, patience, and support. Michelle was not born a legend. She carried every label placed on her, through mud, injury, and doubt, until she made a path of her own. The film never needs to overstate its inspiration. Her setbacks make the triumph believable, because success never comes without cost. Her refusal to quit drives the story. The falls, the objections from those she loved, and the limits left by injury, reveal the struggle behind success. That is often what real life looks like. Michelle's devotion to racing was never only about trophies. It came from her bond with horses, and the life her family built around them. That bond helped her rise. On nights when quitting seemed easier, what carries someone through the longest years is rarely a prize or public praise. It is the passion they refuse to surrender. From claims that women lacked the strength to race, to doubts about a Mo-Tram to one outsider, Michelle spent years challenging limits imposed by others. Most people also hear voices saying they are not talented enough to succeed. Freedom begins when we stop accepting other people's limits and prove ourselves through action. That choice belongs to us. There is no overnight miracle here, only training repeated day after day, attention to every detail, and the courage to begin again. Michelle and Prince were both underestimated, but their partnership produced one of racing's greatest upsets. The achievement belonged to an entire team. That is one of life's life's simplest truths. Greatness is rarely something we are born with. It comes from doing ordinary work exceptionally well, and continuing when the road grows difficult. The lesson from racing is simple. Winning demands more than raw strength. It also requires patience, judgment, and trust between horse and rider. Michelle carried those lessons into the biggest race. She began as an outsider, waited for the right opening, and moved when the moment finally came. That decision changed Australian racing history. Ride Like a Girl transforms an old insult into a statement of skill, courage, and pride.